and income constant. An increase in the price of a good has two effects on an individual's demand. So substitution effect. What does it mean by substitution effect? We define this kind of effect by this. The change in quantity demanded when the goods price increases, holding other prices and consumers' utility constant. So would you please highlight the second part here? Consumer utility. And income effect, the change in quantity demanded when income changes, holding prices constant. Okay? And you may make some notes in somewhere blank. Consumer utility unchanged or constant. Consumer utility unchanged. It's actually we just try very hard to do something about the real income. So actually we are talking about real income, and there are two ways to express the idea. What does it mean by real income unchanged? So if we want to hold real income constant, and we have two ways to do this, and the very first way is just to hold the consumer utility. So this is just one type, and later on I will introduce another type. So it just keep it in mind that the reason why we want to hold consumer utility constant is because we want to capture the idea that the real income kept unchanged. We just want to keep real income unchanged. Okay? And let me give you another example. So now we have the idea about the change of income when P1 increases. And I'll give you the opposite one. Q1, Q2. If this is the initial budget line, and this is the initial consumption bundle, the optimal choice we make. When the budget line changes from the initial one to the new one, if we call it I1, oh no, we don't want to use I1. Okay, just change from here to here. So what happened if we hold P2 and Y constant? What happened to P1? Do you think P1 increases or decreases? Decreases, right? So this effect is due to P1, due to the drop in P1. Okay? So because the price of good one decreases, which means good one becomes cheaper. So we may have a larger consumption bundle, right? A larger consumption set. And in this case, if the new optimal choice is from here to here, then from E1 to E2 is the price effect. This is the price effect. And what would be the substitution effect? So we hold the utility unchanged and make a new relative price. So the new price, P1 to P2, new price, we make a parallel line here. Okay? So make this parallel line tangent on the same utility curve, on the same, indifference curve. So our utility unchanged, right? So make this as E star. So from E1 to E star, you will see the substitution effect make the consumption on good 1, or the quantity demanded of good 1, increased. And so from E1 to E star is the substitution effect. And also you will see the substitution effect caused by the drop of P1 makes the quantity demanded of Q2, of good 2, decreased. Okay? And later on, from E star to E2, is a parallel shift outward, which reflect by the effect of the drop in P1, makes us having a higher real income because our real purchasing power is increased, okay, due to the change in P1. Since we have now a higher real income, our consumption on Q1 is further increased, and the consumption of Q2 caused by the income effect is also increased. Okay? So the price effect from E1 to E2, the price effect on good 1 and the price effect on good 2 can be decomposed into substitution effect and income effect. So the substitution effect on good 1, the substitution effect on good 2, and the income effect on good 1 and the income effect on good 2. So from E1 to E star, we are capturing the substitution effect, and from E1 to E star to E2 is all about income effect. Okay? So just check the difference here. From here to here, which is because P1 increases, okay? So the price effect from E1 to E2 is due to the increase of P1. From here to here is the decrease of P1. And we may decompose from E1 to E2 by a change in price, but holding the consumer utility constant. So we change from E1 to E2. We change the price, but holding the consumer utility constant. Okay? So using this technique or using this skill, this trick, we may have the substitution effect. And then the parallel shift is capturing the income effect, just like the parallel shift from E star to E2 is capturing the income effect. And the reason why the income effect or the shift is outward here, which means the real income increased. And here, from E star to E2, you see the real income decreased. The reason is because the price is cheaper here, but the price is higher here, right? And a higher price not only changes the relative prices, but also your real income. With a higher price, your real income must be lower. With a lower price, your real income must be higher. Okay? So imagine that in a world with all things or with some things cheaper, you will feel your purchasing power. It's actually not only a feeling, it's a real thing. Your purchasing power can be raised up. And in a world, there are something more expensive, and your purchasing power will be lower. Okay? So your purchasing power is reflected by the income effect. And the very first thing you must to notice is the direction of the substitution effect is always negative. It's always negative, which means since we have a negative sloping Q1, Q2, we have a negatively sloping indifference curve. So when the relative price becomes from E1 to E star, becomes lower. So from E1 to E star, and holding P2 unchanged, Y unchanged, what do you think we would move from points E1 to E star? Of course, P1 drops, right? Because P1 is lower, so the slope or the tangent line or the tangent line, the straight line becomes flatter, right? Okay? But on the contrary, all right, let me give you this. Let's just finish the first case. When P1 drops, our consumption on Q1 must increase because the point from here to here is a negative sloping curve, right? If we want to hold our consumer utility unchanged, then we must move from upper left to lower right, right? The point must be from upper left to lower right. And it must in this way, right? In this way, which means Q1 must be increased and Q2 must be decreased. So this is what we mean always negative. Substitution effect is always negative. P1 is smaller, then Q1 must be higher. And P2, although it is unchanged, but relatively, P2 becomes more expensive now, right? Relatively. Although it's itself unchanged, but since P1 is lower, so relatively P1 to P2, which just like P2 is increased. Alright? So the price of good 2 is higher, relatively higher. Then we just reduce the consumption on good 2. So more good 1, less good 2 is because the relative price change. Okay? This is what we call negative substitution effect. But on the contrary, if P1 increases with the constant P2, relatively good 1 is more expensive, but good 2 is more cheaper. Sorry, not no more. Good 2 is cheaper. So in this case, this would be E1, this would be E star, right? When the price goes up, then the slope would be steeper. Or the curve would be steep, the straight line would be steeper, reflecting the increase in P1. So from here to here, you will see good 1. We just cut the consumption of good 1, but increase the consumption of good 2, right? So good 1, in this case, good 1 is relatively more expensive. Good 2 is relatively cheaper. So we increase the consumption on the cheaper one, but decrease the consumption on the more expensive one. Is it intuitive? All right? Because we want to hold the indifference curve unchanged. And the indifference curve is negatively sloping. All right? So the substitution effect must be negative, always be negative. So you've got to memorize this by heart. Okay, substitution effect is always negative. So when price increases, individuals consume less of it because they are substituting away from the now more expensive good. And the direction of the income effect depends upon whether the good is normal or inferior. So, in this case, when P1 drops, the price effect will look like this. So your income, your real income must be increased. And in this case, your real income, okay, because P2 is constant, so the vertical intercept is unchanged. So from here to here is the price effect. And from here to here, you see the drop in your real income. Okay? As your real income increased, so what do you think? The resulting points will be here, or here, or here. What do you think? It depends, right? We just talked about, in the previous 2 hours, we just talked about the income effect. So when you got a higher income, if you go in this way, then good 1 and good 2 are normal goods. And if you go in this way, then good 1 is normal, but good 2 is inferior, right? But if you go in this way, which means good 1 is inferior and good 2 is normal, right? Okay? So the price effect can be what? Can be here, can be here, can be here, can be here. So when P1 drops, the substitution effect makes Q1 higher substitution effect, but say 1, 2, and 3. In case number one, because now good 1 is inferior, right? As you have a higher real income, you consume less, right? The income effect. So the income effect make Q1 less. So you increase the consumption by substitution effect, but you cut it back a little bit by income effect. Because in this case, good 1 is inferior. Okay? So the direction is opposite. And the resulting direction should be here or should be here. It depends on the relative effects of substitution and income effect. The case I show you here is we got a higher substitution effect and a lower income effect. But can it possible the final consuming point falls on this case number 4? Is it possible? Of course it is possible, right? Indifference curve here. And I can draw you another indifference curve like this, right? So when we got case number 4, you will see, okay, we still have the same substitution effect, but now the income effect is so large, is so high, okay? So if something is really inferior, it's a very, very inferior thing, then the income effect may exceed the pricing, the substitution effect. Okay? So in this case, you will see the final result, the price effect, will make a smaller consumption on good one, right? And it's interesting because you got something cheaper. Your price is lower, but you consume less. When something is cheaper, but however you consume less, what happened? It's just violate the law of demand, right? Because you, given the law of demand, we say, oh, you have a lower price, you must consume more, right? But now we find something weird. A lower price leads us to a lower consumption. What happened? In this case, we call it a given good. So a given good good is actually something inferior and very, very inferior. It is too inferior so that the income effect exceeds the substitution effect. Okay? Once again, when you see the P1, the price of good one, P1, drops, the price is lower, and we know the substitution effect is always negative, so that the consumption by the substitution effect of Q1 must be higher, right? A lower P1 must have a higher Q1 star, given or due to the substitution effect. But at the same time, because something is cheaper, so your real income must be higher, right? Your real purchasing power must be higher. However, if good one is an inferior good, you have a higher income, you consume it less. This is the definition of inferior good, right? Your income increased, but you consume less, right? Inferior good. And if good one is inferior enough, which means the reverse effect can be really large. So the inferior good, due to the income effect, may exceed the substitution effect. So makes the final or makes the resulting effect, the price effect, can be negative. I mean, when the price drops and we consume less Q1, it can happen. So this is the case corresponding to number 4, and the reason why we have case number 4, or why we have difference good, is because the income effect is so large for the inferior good. So, do you remember I give you something 0, 1. The income elasticity is a luxury, necessary, inferior, right? So when your inferior good is inferior enough, is very, very extremely inferior, then it can be a difference good. Or we may say in a reverse way. If you see something which is in difference good, we may conclude that this difference good must be an inferior good and very inferior. Is that clear? Okay? And if it is not inferior that much, then the resulting effect, although we have a increased consumption of good one because of the negative substitution effect, but with the reverse or inverse effect due to the income effect, but the resulting will be still have a higher quantity demanded, right? And in this case, when it is a normal good, when Q1 is a normal good, so substitution effect plus income effect, we have a higher price effect. And case number 3, an even higher price effect. So normally, we will see something when something whose price drops. Normally, we will have a higher quantity demanded because we have a negative substitution effect which makes us consume more. And if it is normal good, we have a higher purchasing power so that we consume even more. So the price effect will be composed by these two parts, right? It's the sum of the price effect, the substitution effect and income effect. So normally we will go in this direction due to the substitution effect and further a normal good income effect. But if the good is inferior, then substitution effect makes our consume more, but the income effect cuts our consumption. But it depends on the extent, the size. If the size is not that much, then the resulting is still increase the consumption. But if the income effect is real big for the inferior good, then we will have a difference good, violating the law of demand. Is it clear? Okay, it's 40. Any question? Let me see, do we have something? Okay, wait. So when price increases and the good is normal, the income effect is negative. And when price increases and the good is inferior, the income is positive. And inferior good and difference good. It's a little bit confusing for these two sentences or these two statements, and I will explain in more detail next week. Okay. So, do you have the